The screen you're seeing, I don't know why it's showing like that. It's not supposed to be showing like that. So I want to actually reset the screen so that you can have a better view. I don't know why that screen just stopped working the way it's supposed to work. So let's do screen 6. Okay, so moving on. I've been able to explain how many things now. I've been able to explain the first level, data communication to your database, and we've been able to connect. I've been able to explain the services, that's the business logic part. And let me talk a little bit more about the services, just a little bit more, because you can easily just think this is a connection point. Now, what I'm doing here, apart from the fact that you saw that I was able to get the database connection, or rather get the employees, notice what other thing I did here. I did data conversion. Data conversion, very important. I did data conversion here. Hey, you didn't need to do this one. I don't think I will ever get error here. Why is it complaining here? Okay. Yeah, I don't think I will get error in this part. So I did data conversion. So this other part is also where you will do other things that has to do with getting employees. Anything that has to do with getting employee, if you need to correct, clean up the data, this would be the best place to do it. Now let's go to the handler. Where is the handler guy? That's handler is from the controller. If I go to the API, there's nothing that we're doing with we're not using anything for the employee. So let's go ahead and create employee. Employee.go. Okay, hold on. Let me check if we're on the right page. So let's move on. Yeah, automatically we have our package API driven out for us. The same process. You can't miss this, guys. The same process, the same methodology. We're going to maintain this same process. You create the type, you create the new instances of how you create it. Here, you create the type, you create the instances of how you initiate it. We're not missing that out in services again. The same thing we're going to do in services, and that's rather in controller. You start with a type, and it's called employee controller. Maybe I'll eventually change to employee API. Maybe, but let's leave it as controller. So in order to not to have longer names, so you create the type, and in this controller, what are the services that it will be accessing? Yeah, it can access more than one services, and the idea is that these things are supposed to be decouplable. Other things are supposed to be able to use them. I mentioned the last time that the purpose of doing this is such that it's testable, right? You don't want to do something that everything is tied to one place and then you can't test it. Okay, so what you want to put here is that is a service that the controller will be using. what service will the controller? The good thing is that we've already created it. So we have it under where? We have it under services dots. We've already created it. So you can see all the ones you've created. So it means you can even use, of course, it won't make sense to be using organizational services, but you use the one that you need to use for it. But let me just show you one funny thing and how interesting the whole thing is. Let me finish it up and I'll show you one interesting thing. So we've done this part, and again, the next thing is to be able to create an instance of what you've done. So you have employee controller. You literally repeat this. You put a new in the front. That's what you do. You put a new in front. So because I mentioned Golang is not an object-oriented programming, it's just finds itself in the middle, and you return a pointer of what, of this, and so this feature you are doing allows you to create an allow you to create a method out of it. That's the idea of what you're doing. So you return, and you want to return a pointer back to what you're doing. So you create this one here. So you are literally creating itself. You are creating an instance of what you have, but this time around you are putting an actual service inside. So what service are you putting inside of it? You are putting the service dot, can't even see what I'm typing. So you do new please mute your section, please mute your end. Services new employee controller. Okay, no, we're not calling the controller, we're calling the services rather. Okay, so we have that. Okay, so we have that done. Now, the interesting part, before going to write the function, I just want to show you something. We can say these employee services. Please, your sound is distracting me, please. Can mute your side. Okay, so we have the employee services here. I just want to try and show you something without writing the function already. We have employee services. We have org services. This is not org services. So what I'm saying here is that this employee controller can do these things, even though it's not normal for it to have this way, but I'm just giving you guys an idea and the gist. So here I can go ahead and say the employee has this, and the org has new. I've not created this one. Have I created this one? I don't think I've created that one. So let's stop here. So let's not add too much to the whole thing. So here it's talking about, so you don't really have to put the services thing, but whatever you put there, you will replicate the same thing when you are trying to create the new instances of it. Now the next thing is now trying to remember this is your controller. So this is where whatever you put here is what you are going to show to the public, and that's where your Swagger documentation will come to play. So let me just say get employee by ID. That's the first thing we need to be put in there. So you say your function get employee by ID. Now this is going to be a little bit different because this is your controller. So your controller will now have your context, your gene.context. So this is going to be different from everything you've been seeing. So this is how your controller is going to look. Not everything in total. There's still one thing I'm missing, and it's on purpose. So you need the other thing I'm missing is your tying it to this particular guy, right? So it has to be called employee controller. So this function you are writing will be accessible when you create an instance of this. So you put it here. So this becomes your either your API or your CTL, anyhow you want to call it. So this controller becomes what you'll be using to reference what you want to call. This controller now has ability to call these services. Yep, this controller has the ability to call these services. So of course we can't use C again. This C is already taken. So I use A, API. So I can use CTL or something. Anything you want to use is fine. Okay, and then this has to be a pointer of this. Now inside of these, what are things that you can call is that you can call your service to do stuff for you. So I can say, hey, there's a service I want, and that is called, you can call your service, and this service was because I called it service here. So I wanted to experiment and call it other names so that you see what's happening, right? If I call it employee, because it's employee related, that's what will be available for me here. So it's say controller.employee dot, get employee, and by ID it's gonna go and do that stuff for me. So but we just have the generic services everywhere. So most times you get to see that everything is looking the same. If you open the next file, it's looking the same, because for now we've not started doing the complex thing. We are still doing the simple thing. By the time you start becoming complex, you now start specifying proper label for each of these things. So it's still generic like this, and it's still okay. Now, how do you get the ID? This is where we now start doing Swagger documentation. So I'm going to let AI do this for me. So don't worry, I'm going to explain it. I'll just say add Swagger documentation. I already explained this one in previous video. Documentation and complete the code. So, but I've already done the heavy lifting. The heavy lifting is explaining this other part. I don't think it's even doing Swagger document. Okay, it's doing the Swagger thing for us. So which is not bad. So the explanation of the Swagger documentation, this is not needed. It does the summary, get an employee by ID, description, nothing special here. So the parameter in which we are trying to get it is by parts. So it means we are doing employees and ID. I always prefer to do employee/ID. I don't know why, but I just like, oh, this is the only employee by ID. Just like doing this thing like so. Okay, so and then the method we are calling is a get. So what we are returning as a failure, all these ones is wrong. So again, we are returning a DTO. We already have that as a that's what we are returning. We're not returning a model. So it's very good for you to make this sure that this thing is correct. Then the part is integer. What is coming here is integer. So you need to be able to get this from the context, which is the gene context here. And that's what this guy did for you. Whatever ID that you put here, whatever name you put here, you have to be what is here. So this has to be a string like this, and this will do. So if I do control save, it will import all the things that we need. So it has imported this one. So if peradventure there's an issue in getting this, it returns bad stuff to the user. So we have a utility that we use. I didn't know why it didn't see that there. So I'm just gonna put the utility there. Now it has gone to do nonsense for me. So I'm just gonna put this like so, and tell it to just say invalid ID, then delete this, and we have something that will return for failure. So this is error code what? This error code 400, error code 400 return. There's a name I call this. I can't remember right now, but okay, I think I remember it now. It's called util error response. So that's the same thing we return across board for any form of error. Then 404 means the person does not exist or the user does not, like, so I'm still using this one as a means of my status. So I say employee not found. That's error 404, and I delete this one. Why do we have this like this? Services error. So this is supposed to be, so this is getting this all wrong. This is supposed to be using, okay, I think I get what is happening here. Oh, okay. So what I want to do is this. I know what's happening, because it's possible that we return an error here and I didn't mark the error that is coming back. So that's why it's having this issue like this, but I will just still return that. That's what we got there. I will put it as internal server error and just dump the error there like that. Sorry. I'll just dump the error there like that. So saves me a lot of time. So what is the problem with this ID? So apparently the ID, it wants us to use, convert it. It wants to convert it to especially what it wants. Yeah, you int. Okay. I guess we're good to go. Yep. We have DTO and we return our DTO like that. But this is our DTO supposed to return like this. Okay. So we've successfully created a full-blown end-to-end data from our database DAO to our service to our controller. The next thing we need to do is to call it up, right? Let's call it up and let's see how it works. So we come to our service. Where's our service guy? And that's why sometimes it's good to put a name in front, so you will get lost easily, trust me. So it happens all the time. So you can do employee services. I don't know how you want to manage this, but so it helps you know where you are. So this is another one again. So you can do AI. Okay, this API. So it lets you easily track which one is which across, the whole channel. We're looking at the controller, which is this part, and then now that we've been able to do all this, how do you then put everything together in the main? This is the main guy. How do you execute it here? Well, very easy. You need to create a new instances of employee controller and then use it. Simple. So let's see how it is done here. So this is services, which is wrong. It's not supposed to be done this way, but we'll look at this later. This is the right way to do it. You create an instance of what? Of a controller, and then you consume it. So I do employee controller and API dot new employee controller, and we are good to go. So if you wanted to pass something that is special that needs to be used inside this, you pass it across. Just like, for example, I did this. This is consuming the services direct, which is not advisable. I don't even know why this was done this way, but later we'll fix this one later. So the sign of controller, this is to allow assessment. So I don't know who wrote this. Was I the one that wrote this? I don't know who wrote this, but this is the official process. The controller is to be assessed by creating new instances of the controller. By creating new instances of the controller, you initiate some things down the line. So we'll have employee controller We go straight to where we need it. And by the way, I'm going to do further cleanup. In fact, I think I should do the cleanup in this video. I think so. I think I'll do the cleanup in this video. And you're going to see how nice the whole thing is going to get over time. So something is happening. Why is my code not allowing me to put comments? I've removed the comments, so why is it not working? Okay. Okay, so this part got called out. No wonder. Declared and not, but I tried to use it. You didn't make it available for me. You didn't let me use it. So let's move on. It's kind of stuck. Gets employee by ID. There's a kind of issue here. I need to make sure that my ID is all small letter and not big letter like this. It has to be all small letter like that. Am I going to replace? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I think we are good. Now, one thing you will notice is that this page is getting longer and we've not written anything. I'm sure you know that we've not written anything. Like we've not scratched the surface of what we are doing, and then this page is becoming bloated already. So we need to sanitize this place. Like this code needs to get sanitized. So I need to show you how we intend to do that. There are several methods we will be using, but we're going to be using one simple method. It allows for code sanity, especially for your routes, because your routes can get really crazy. Okay, so how do we do something like sanitizing our routes to make it very easy for you to be able to contain? Is by putting them inside another section. So I'm gonna need help here. It's been kind of a long time I actually created something like that, so I want to see how I did it the last time. Let me see. Okay, so let me try if I can remember how that is done. So let's do it together. So before we go ahead and start creating the route, let me even test what I've done to see if it is working. So let's go ahead and test our endpoint, because we just wrote the code and then we didn't test if it's working or not. That's serious. So if we come here, we want to test if we check employee by ID, and we just have the ID sitting to be 1. Okay, we have all this bunch of errors saying that. Okay, let's give it a try again. Maybe it wants us to log in, and I'm sure we are in. Then let's give it a try. Okay, still giving the same issue. Now let's check the database and see, or rather the error in the terminal, to see where the issue is coming from. So I was able to call the endpoint, no issue on site. So what I want to do is, let me even call it directly. Let's call it out. So it's not executing. Why is that so? So we are using the wrong endpoints actually. So we are not doing it correctly. So this is supposed to be ID like this. Yes, this is supposed to be called this way. So let's give it a try again. And hopefully this time around, fingers crossed, this is supposed to get employee by ID. So, yep, this is working. Even though, let me check if there's anybody called employee one. If it's going to bring anything out. There's employee one, but there's no record. I'm going to ignore that. Should we ignore it or we should pursue it? So I'm going to ignore that. It's something that we can work on, but at least our code is hitting the mark, is trying to connect the dots. So interesting. Let me see if I can run all employees. That's going to be a huge data. Did I even create? I didn't even create these endpoints. No, I didn't create these endpoints. So no need to run that. Okay. So what I want to do is, how do we put all these things in their different and respective routes? So I want to put them in their respective routes because, like I said, this thing is getting too much. Yeah, we need to create a way because this is supposed to, over time, this is going to be so big. So I need to put them in their own respective routes. So I'll create a new folder, and you can see that folder is becoming crazily much. But the idea is that we know what those folder does. So there's a new folder, and that folder is called, should I call it router or routes? So I'll just call it, in order to make this thing visible, I think I'll just call it routes. You will be like, router for front end now, back end to get routes. And this is the example of the routes that we're talking about. So I'll create for, so I do create this route for which purpose? For purpose of more like tied to functionality or modules. Yes. Like for example, authentication routes will all be there. For modules for employee management or HR related stuff, I put them all together in one place. So let's start with authentication route. Where is the route guy? So I can say auth route arrow, it's the go. Okay, so we have our new route set. So the question is, how do you create this route thing? Let's try and see if I still remember how this thing goes again. So remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to group all the routes in one page or in a folder. So what that means is that everything authentication route, that's what authentication, we'll put it in this page. So that way we don't need to, clog the main.go file. So if you now get to organizational module, everything in that place will be there. Okay, so once you come to this place, so we'll say auth routes. Now, this is where the tricky part comes to play. So we bring router from Gene, the router group. Router group is where the magic comes to play. Now we can safely now call proper router for our normal router. We can now copy and paste all our routers here. So let's look for all the authentication thing, router for authentication. So where are the authentication guy? Everything for authentication, I'll put them in a place. But before I put them in a place, I can call the guy here by saying routers. What do I call the guy here again? So I'll say routers dot, I don't know why it's not checking it for me again. I don't know why it's not bringing it up for me automatically. So I'll say this. Then since I created a group, I'll say version 1 inside like this. So everything for auto route should be here. All these guys now, I will now go and put it, everything that has to do with authentication, all these authentication guys, apart from this business, this is another route. This should be inside that route. So we'll come here, everything here I'll put it inside here. But guess what? This will not be called V1. This will now be called the router here. So, of course, I have to go and do all this, my gymnastics that I did outside. The admin, or rather this one here, will not be done here anymore. Will now be done here. Will not be done here. So we brought in one. How did this one escape? Business router and authentication router. Create account. Create account. Should it be under authentication? I don't think where should this one shouldn't be under authentication now. It should be under business. So I'm going to comment this one. So since you are watching, figure out where this one will be. Okay. Now, as you see, our code will be looking smaller now. You can see that the footprint is better. We now have, if we want to say anything about authentication route, we'll click right here and then to take us to that part. So I want to clean up the remaining one. I want to clean up these ones. Do we have any other? I won't clean up anyone again. I will just leave it like that. But let me look for, why is this one here? So obviously the reason why this one is here is because it needs to be protected. This route is a protected route. You need to be logged in to create to use it. But because you have to go here, a group. There's a middleware that checks. It uses a middleware. But that doesn't mean that we can't use it inside. So let me show you how to use it inside. There's a middleware implementation here. So I can copy all the things that goes with it here and go to this part and try and replicate the same thing. Let me copy everything complete and then copy this one. Okay, now instead of the V1, it will be the route, so that this one will now be like this, and this auth protected will be using the middleware, and then it can then do this. But I don't think this one is right. It's not right here. This is not the right place to be calling employee because it's not under authentication. So I will then route the employee somewhere else. It's safe for me to now remove this one. Yep, apart from the employee. Yeah, I will do that one later. Okay, so our code is looking slimmer. Quick fix, add import. So I think my Golang is a little bit broken because it's seeming not to be able to import things by itself. So we don't need the employee controller again because, okay, let me bring the employee controller. Okay, let me bring the employee controller back. So I'll create employee route. You can see it's not auto doing anything again. It's not doing anything again. So I can do now. Remember that I have a protected this stuff is supposed to be protected. Employee route. So I can spell it in full sha. So I don't want to call it employee route because we'll be doing a lot of things inside organizational module. So instead of employee route is so limited. So I can just call it organizational route so that I can rename this one to org route. So it's supposed to import this one now. It can't import it. So something is wrong with my Golang. I might need to off the browser and bring it back up again. I think it's complaining that it needs to restart or something. So I've discovered that suddenly this guy now becomes so slow. Don't know why. Maybe because I installed Zend. So ever since, I think this has been delaying it to do its needful. So let's see if it's faring better now. Okay, so it's complaining about this one. New controller will come here. Our package. So I think it's trying to do some things by itself now. So this is supposed to be org route. Then this is supposed to be was supposed to be going inside this so that I can do employee by ID, and I can do employee and do get by ID. So here I'm protecting the route and doing all this. Okay, so anything that you need to do for, so I don't need to call it authentication protected again. Just say protected. Protects. Okay, so this one is, okay, let's say secure. Secure is better. So this one now is for my employee endpoints. So I can do more endpoints that has to do with organizational management here. Everything here. So imagine you have like, you're going to have like tens, I think almost up to like more than 20 endpoints, you know, at its own. So imagine it's ending up inside the main. This is going to be so rowdy. So now you can have something like this side by side, and it's easier to look at and to manage. So if you click here, you jump in here. If you go here, you click here, you jump in here, and you can easily manage stuff. So if I save now, this should be resolved. So you can see that it's not here. If I save, it should resolve itself. So I think it was acting up the other time, but I think everything is back in order now. So if I should look at it, even though it's still looking clumsy, eventually all these ones are going to be resolved into, and they're going to end up like this. They're going to end up like this, properly routed. So this one should be, if you ask me now, after this now we'll move on to the front end. So I'll say setup. So this should be called setup route, and then we're still passing v1 to it. So v1 means that v1 is the one we're using to post. So unlike the other one that we used another route to post, so everything is under this section. So all this one now can be under, if I copy this one now, I can come and put it under setup.go route. That's sign up rather. Sign up route. I need to put S here. Sign up. Then we have our package. We have this one for it. So this is supposed to be called sign up. Not really sign up, but for now that's what we'll call it. It's more like onboarding. So for now we call it sign up. We can always rename it later. So then the business controller thing, even though it's not done correctly, we will call it the proper name later. Okay, this one is not bad. So, but you don't need to create an instance of the You don't need to do this. This can be done inside here, inside the new business controller. You don't need to do it outside. You can go and instantiate it inside there. So I copy this, come to here, and consume it right here. Good. Then we can call it here. So it's called sign up. Yeah. So we are building something, guys. We are building it gradually. So this employee, oh, this guy is coming here. He's handing over. So who is the business guy? Where is the business file? We've handed business to someone else. Wait, let me look for where that business guy is. Business guy is inside sign up. Okay. So this shouldn't be inside sign up. It should just be general. But let me just put him there. Just put him there for now. So it should be his own thing. It should be something that anybody should be able to access, not just accessible to sign up. It's one of those public stuff that you should be able to get. So imagine all this guy. We've filtered them away. AI. So let me group these guys together. So it's looking slim now, and it's looking better, and it's looking more professional. So this is how eventually it's going to, we're going to be adding more routes like those, like so. So we now have another folder to manage, so you can keep adding it like that. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about Gene routes, controller services, and DAO. There are still other levels, but for this project, this is the level we are stopping. Anything further than this will bring confusion. Now let's go to the front end. Let me see what we've done. Let me push the changes that has been done. I don't think there's anything for me to pull. Let me dump everything as it is right now. Let me get to see what it does. And please, this is how you should be making your commits. Make your commits through AI like this. There's nothing that you type. This is going to be more better than whatever you type, right? So of course, go through it to make sure that everything is done properly. Add employee endpoint and refactor routes. Implement new employee endpoint with get employee. We've not even tested this thing properly to know if it's working. So I'm going to remove this one. But the routes that we did, okay, it mentioned that we did routes. Okay, so let's push that thing there, and let's go to the front end quickly. So I'm going to stop the server and put it on again, and we might need to do some rigorous testing. Where is the server? I have the server here. So I'm going to stop all the server. I think I want to run the server from a proper terminal. Yeah. So make dev. So I believe the server is up and running. Okay, so let's go and look at the app and see what we have on the app. There are quite some things that I want us to talk about. We're not even looking at the app as a demo. There are fundamental key changes that I've done inside the app that I want us to look at, not just the physique of the app, but I thought I was going to make this into a different video, but let's capture it at once. Now, one of the things that I just discovered now is the let's fix that, then we'll move, because we can't log in without making sure that this thing is done properly. I think the problem is here. Okay, but this is resolved. This is supposed to be 3,000 actually, not 9,000. So if you have it at 9,000, it won't work. So it means I have to change this to 9,000 for it to work. So if I change it to 9,000, it will work, but that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be at 3,000 because this is our client server and that is our server. So let me give it a try again. We'll find a way to resolve this issue with the IP thing so that we can work remotely and easily. It's still not working. Let me try and start and stop the server again and see where the issue is coming from. Okay, so now I need to check what's happening. So like I said, it's checking 9,000. So let me check what is happening in the main backend. So we need to find a lasting solution to this. And that's why I have more than one IP going up here. So we have this, we have this. Let me see what we have in our, nah, not this one. Let me see what we have in our make file. Okay, our make file didn't specify anything, but let me check our environment variable for the web. Okay, at what point did I specify? Somebody has gone to do something here. Now this is becoming tiring. Okay, let me check this carefully. Okay, so let me look at this guy again. So we have our 10 server ports. Even when I put it at this, it didn't still work. Okay, still that didn't work. Okay, so let me see. Okay, I think I've seen the issue. The issue is this. I didn't even say this before. This is what caused the issue. You can't have this and this together. You have to have one. So the only thing you need to do, I will mention this again, is to have your IP inside here. Add your IP there. You can't have those two together. I don't think you can have those two together. Let me check. So that's it. We're in. So you can't have those two together. You have to have one. You have to have one of that thing in there. Okay, so let's go to the system and talk about the changes that has been done in the app entirely. what has been happening to the front end. I'm sure you are still at the where we are. Welcome. So there's been a lot of changes in the system. I hope this thing will now work now because of what I just changed. Remember, this is what you should have. I mentioned it, just have your own IP, add your IP there, and then you should be fine. Just have your IP, add it continuously, you should be fine. That one that was there before, this here spoils everything. It's a long story. I can't start explaining now. Okay, so here let's see what we'll have if everything is working. I mentioned that this should be changed. This is still not changed. And I also was wondering why there were error on the web page. I couldn't build this application. Whenever you have an app like this, you should be able to build it without an error. So what do I mean? You should be able to do pm build. This should just work. You shouldn't have this. This is a disaster. This shouldn't happen. So you should build your application without error. So we need to fix all this, because without this, we can't even put some things online. So that is pending. Let me go through the system to see what it's up with it. Okay. I still have the challenge I mentioned. Still can't move past this section, but we'll move on to the other part of the system. So the first thing is that I need to first fix this, then I will introduce what are the things that are in the system that we want to work on. So here is asking me to, so we need to resolve all these errors actually. So we go in here. There are a couple of things that were not used and they are still in the system, which begs to, which I'm kind of, so I'm trying to remove. And again, we can't do any, you have to be specific to what your data is. Okay, so if we have a code that is not working, we just remove it from the list. This can never go on the live stuff. Okay, so let's remove what we need to remove. So we still have some code base. All of these were not used. Okay, so while we're, instead of focusing on this, let's go ahead and focus on what we wanted to talk about, which is the changes that I've added to the system. Starting from the entry point of the application, which is the app dot, where is it again? Which is this part here. Let me start from main. So in the main page, what happens there is the entry. Even though there's nothing, so to say, it just helps the mobile application kind of to do some splash screen and what have you. Nothing so special. But I need to talk about the persistent storage manager. Persistent storage manager. So I know that you have your storage thing going on for you, local storage, but this is the storage you are supposed to be using, right? Over time. So I want to explain the storage management system on the platform and how it works. Currently we use Next Team. That's the team for, so I don't need to worry about this part here. I don't put this on the storage. I just focus on it. Okay, so how does the storage stuff works? Very, very important. How does the storage thing works? So we have a store here where I've kept quite some things in there. I've been brewing some things there. So I have a store, and let's look at what we've stored inside there so far. So for now, I store the settings. The settings is where you say work completed, the role, and the language. Even though I don't use this language, I just put it there to just hold data, so it's not even relevant. So this role is will determine, oh, where am I? So if I start from here, for example, let's say I start from here, welcome. Why do I keep entering the same thing over and over again? So if I start from here and I find myself here, so this part here is where it means role. I mean, I'm still in business sign up, so that's what it means. So how do I save all those things in the system? I use persistent store that I created, so it's not something, yeah, I think it's something with capacitor shell. So but I'm able to pass the class inside here, and that's all you need to do. So you need to create this section, whatever you want to save, you put it inside the class, and we're gonna obviously have a field like the data, and you're gonna write this line of code to say export constants, then use setting store. You can say use setting, but it's better to also put store to it to know that it's saving something, and you continue with this part. Now look at the authentication state stuff. This is what I use to manage the authentication state of the entire app, to know if the person is logged on or not logged on. So I have this user. I created the class, right? And then I have this user. Now this user is DTO from employee. Remember DTO now from our fixed top. So I bring it in, and I said that the person can be empty, null, undefined. By default is undefined. And I created a store for it. Now this part is managed. This one is a little bit sophisticated. The one that is easy to understand is this one, use store. So the question is, where do I have it used? So let's see where it is used. So it was used in business onboarding, whereby I say I set value, and you can also get the value. Very important. You know, when you are using use states, so it brings from use state x sets x, where you now have use states, and then you can now have a string. Now I'm sure you relate with this now. This is fairly easy. So you are doing the same here, where you say here you have set value and value. Now what that means is that you can actually call it this way. Let me reverse it. So this can be value, and set value. Now this value are usable within the system, and this set value can be used to set the value of the value inside. So I can literally say value dot welcome completed. Do you see that he went to go and bring the details? Or value dot row dot, or is equal to, it will give me this option. That's if I'm using value. But if I'm calling a lot of things, this value and set value will conflict. If I'm having a lot of storage that I want to use within my page, these guys are going to be conflicting. So what do I do? Or how do we manage that? We manage that by saying the value should be something. I can say settings. So that means I can say settings. I can do something like this and say settings. So this one here, the value will be assigned here, so I can use it within my code and say settings.row, which is okay. I'm just trying to make sure that you understand, you know, the context of which I'm using it. This, I'm sure you understand this one. This React, normal x and set x, or x, y, z, x, y, z, and set x, y, z. So that's the context of how we got this one. Now, if you want to call this set value, of course, I mentioned that if you have multiple of these, you can't be using the same word. So you can now do something like this and say, oh, I want to call it save settings. Anything you mention here is on you. You can call it anything you like, right? Of course, you call it something that you can relate with. Okay. Now, of course, when you know that if you want to set something, you will just do something like this, and then you pass your new value inside. That's how you set, and then the value of this guy gets set. The same way here, if you want to set the value of this, remember that this one is a class. If you want to set the value, you have to pass the property of what you want to pass. So here I'm saving settings, just have specified here. I'm saving that we've not completed it is false, even though I don't need to specify it because it keeps what I've not set. It just focus on what I want to set, obviously, because you specify that by default it should be false, except you want to override the information. So I just pass it explicitly, is false, and then my role is this. So that saves that. So this one is not needed because I'm not displaying any information. If you want to output something now, you can display it. That's when you need this part. And again, that's why I did mention that anything that is not being used, I don't like this red stuff. So make sure that all this red stuff are removed. Okay, that is how to use the storage that I have in the system. It's internally, it does some weird stuff internally. So just don't worry about the internal stuff. The whole thing is being handled. Now let's go to other things I want to call your attention to, and that is I've talked about the starting point, and that's why I brought out this one. This initializes all the store and make it ready for use. Now this app part, it's crazy. I think this has been changed to capital letter. Okay, this is fixed now. What is going on here? There's been some changes. You will notice that there's no more strings here again. I hope you will understand this one. So there's no more string here again, kind of. Everything is now variable, which is crazy. Like, who does this? And the purpose of those variables, except this one here, I just left it for you. But this one obviously is supposed to be inside here, because I was wondering why it's standing there. It's supposed to be under onboarding sign up, but I'll just leave that for you. Now we say, what segment? Segment is not something special. I coined it. It's not a keyword. It's a constant. Now you can see that everything is being drawn out here. From the segment, you can see welcome, alt, login, forget, verify. All the whole thing that needs to be done is here. Now, why go through all this trouble? The idea for all this trouble is such that if you want to change the paths, like if I change the path now to where I want to go, inside the navigate, remember that we still need to use navigate, to paths where we want to go to inside the app. Let's say we change this announcement now to something else. Let me go to the code. Now, this is the guy that is handling the segment. There's two parts to the segment. The first one is the segment part. The second one is the paths. Long story. I'm not going to explain this for now. Long story. So let's say we change what this is. We don't want to call it announcements again. We want to call it something else. ANN. And that's good. We are done. We just need to change it to one place, one source of truth. And if we eventually go into the application, where's the guy? Let's go in. If we eventually go in, we will be able to do what we need to do, and we'll go to announcements. Notice the address. The address has changed. If we even change it midway back to announcements in full, of course, that becomes a place that does not exist anymore. So let's go back to the app itself. And if you just click on the announcements, it's still available. So this one creates a very source of truth and allow you to easily watch your application grow. So that's just that part. That's change that I've done to that section. Of course, you still need to map all these guys to themselves. That's change number 2. Looking at other changes are more of like core, adding new components and UI to the system. So I've been able to do the structure of the app, which is not done yet. The app is not finished in terms of the structure. We are still building quite a lot of stuff. These things that you have here are just dummy. They are not the way the app is going to shape entirely. It's just a mere dummy. Let me see. Okay, this is a dark theme. Yeah, I think this background is better. So this is supposed to be nothing here on the dashboard. This is the announcements. This is still not the end result. Is the employee organogram, nothing, company, nothing. All these ones are nothing. So there's been a lot of design I've also done for mobile, but because I couldn't build it, so there's no actual test of the mobile. So this is the mobile. Once you get up close to the mobile view, you have the mobile available. I think we did this on Asset Care Mobile, so that one is pretty solid. Okay, another thing I did was this effect, which was really time taking, or time. Yeah, it took a lot of time to make that effect actually happen. That's the ability to have this top stay in here for what it's doing. That took a lot of time. Like I said, having this dark and light theme, it's really not an easy thing. So I'm just focusing on, by the time you start working on this, just focus on the dark mode. That should be your focus. But of course, if you want to feel yourself, you can go to see other ones. So I think the last time I mentioned that I've set up the other themes, which is the glass and dark glass thing. So the light is terrible, but I'm gonna switch to it anyway. This is the bright thing. I think the only one that is awkward is the top bar, which is not making use of the lighting very well, but it should still be there. There will be reasons why you want to have something like this. It's not bad. Okay, so we still have quite a lot of work to work on. Quite a lot of things to work on. Yeah, okay, I didn't mention this stuff we have here. So we have this little, yeah, this one here is supposed to also allow for easy navigation. Where is that announcement? Yeah, okay. This thing really took some time. This top bar really took a lot of time. Okay, let's move on to the next thing that we want to address. Let me see the coding there. Now let's now try to build. I think I can stop the